Welcome to Resource Thursday, Vendor Discovery. I'm your host, Paco Lebron. This is the place to learn how to run your IT business, whether you're a one-person shop or leading a team for the journey. This is the place for you. Unfortunately, my co-host Rick Smith cannot be on this episode today. However, we have someone that is more than capable of filling in his shoes. Who may I be talking about? We have none other than John Dubinsky, Director of IT Operations over at ProdigyTeks. John, how are you?
Reporting is ordered, boss. Reporting is ordered.
Happy to talk to John and some of the things that he's doing over here at ProdigyTeks. Kind of dive into. I don't know when's the last time we've actually had you on the show, so I'm wondering if there's some gaps we got to fill for the audience. But we'll talk about that. We'll go into the vendor discovery again, Resource Thursday. So we'll hopefully make sure that there's a lot of value and resources for everyone tuning in today. One of my favorite things before we dive into that is a great resource, and that is TechCon Unplugged. TechCon Unplugged will be in Woodbridge, New Jersey, September 7th to the 10th at the Delta Hotels Woodbridge. Join us for an evening mixer as we kick off 2.5 days of content to help better your business, save money, save time, and improve your services. As we've mentioned earlier in the show, this particular event is for any size IT solution provider, whether you're an emerging managed service provider / IT solutions provider, or you're a veteran in the space. This is the place for you. Tickets are on sale for early bird pricing of $199. And when this releases, you have until tomorrow. So March 31st, this is the last that we have the ability for that $199 pricing. I know in previous years, we've had discounts and codes to bring that price back down. I am here as a man of my word. This will be the last lowest price that you will have for this event as we gain up to the next level of the ticketing pricing. So you have until the end of March 31st to get early bird pricing. And we hope to see you there over at TechCon Unplugged, techconunplugged.com to get your early bird tickets today. All right. Mr. Dubinsky, how are you this fine day?
I'm better than I deserve. That is for sure.
I hear that. So I think for those that are tuning in, I'm pretty sure you've been on since, but why don't we talk a little bit about what you've been up to? What's the day-to-day life of Mr. Dubinsky nowadays over at I guess we'll say the warden's prison, as you could say, of ProdigyTeks.
Well, as you call it, I'll basically just call it the grind. I'm back in the grind a little bit, working for you, trying to maybe absorb everything you young guys are doing, as well as passing on some old man knowledge. And today is one of the things you've tasked me to do on how we can better vet vendors and discover new ones, and maybe provide some direction to the business.
Very cool. Yep. And so for those that don't know or do know, John is formerly of the Maven Group, who has run an IT solution providing business for well over 25 years, successfully exited, and now is providing his expertise to hopefully get ProdigyTeks into a more proficient, efficient, and helping mitigate the risk of our clients and making them as defensible as possible so that they are not as negligent to their users, or prove that they are not negligent to their users. So, John, I asked you today to come on for a couple of reasons, but one specifically on, we go through this shiny object syndrome for tools and things of that nature. When oftentimes there's not a lot of vendor discovery done because we kind of just feed into the hype. And what I mean by this is that, we'll go into a lot of the community groups and a lot of our colleagues, and they'll mention a B vendor that they've been using for so long, and this is kind of the standard bearer and things of that nature. But what I've always appreciated with you, even when we were working together, when we both had our businesses, and even now internally, on trying to find vendors that achieved our specific goal, right? And I think that that's a lost art, in my opinion, where people are not looking at what are they trying to achieve specifically, and have all these like extra features. So for example, we were looking at a vendor where we just needed one particular item, and it was like, we just want one thing, we want one thing only. And we went through all the well-known names, and they said, yeah, we have this, but we have so much more, supersize me and all this other crap and all this other stuff. And, and I bought into the hype, and not to lie. And I was like, I think this is great. This is whatever. And you just kind of sat me down as like, why? What's the question? The why. Why do we need all these features when we only need this? I refuse to believe that there isn't a solution that has X. And sure enough, you were able to find this X solution. We implemented it, we tested it, and it turned out to be good. So I guess in that realm, for someone, one, kind of your perspective of what I just said, and then we can dive in a little bit about what you actually, what's your process, if there is a process of trying to find reputable vendors to do a solution that we need that may not be part of the hype, but achieves the goal that we've set forward. I know that's a lot that I've mentioned,
Oof.
but I'm hoping that we can dive into that a little bit more.
And now in our 9-part series on vendor discovery. So yeah, I mean, let me start by saying that I've had the Lord of the Rings, that precious syndrome before too, where it's, oh, my precious, this is so shiny, and you're just attracted to it for so many reasons that probably have nothing to do with building your business, but I've been there too. So, I mean, I think the place that I would start at first is a little bit of discovery on what we're trying to solve. But then the first thing I always ask myself once I became a little bit mature in this process is, do I need a vendor? And what I mean by that is, let's assume that we're following some sort of discipline like CIS controls, like we do at ProdigyTeks or NIST. Do I require a third-party service vendor, or is it something that I can do in-house? Back when I was running the Maven group, I really came to a determination that I tried to do a lot of the things inside of Google that I could, because I was a big Google vendor, meaning using all of their products with all of my clients. So instead of going outside and find a third-party vendor, I would often look to the own tools that I had, and is there something I could create using Google products versus adding a whole nother vendor onto the stack. But I just wanted to mention that because a lot of times I think we try to reinvent the wheel with a vendor when we probably don't even need one. So, like I wrote a small database program with inside of Google that did some automation on ticket collection from email so that I didn't have to go outside and actually implement a ticketing system. So that would be just a small, brief example of not having to find a third-party vendor. And then the other thing that I looked at as I became more mature was, what is the exact needs? As a business owner, you have to remember that we have pretty much the exact same needs of our customers, meaning that, we're using IT or computer systems to meet the demands and requirements of our customers. So, what's working for me in-house? And the other questions now that you're the MSP looking at that is, does whatever vendor or tool allow you to proactively manage? Is this something that you want to proactively manage? Do you want to do you just want to administratively manage this? Or do you just want to be assistive with this as it fits into the standardization of your MSP product? It's a business I don't want to be in, but I need to set standardization for my clients. So just to be really clear on that, proactive, so you need a vendor or a solution. You just want to be administrative, meaning you have the username and password and that this customer uses. Or 3, you're going to send somebody a link and tell them what to get, but you're kind of removing yourself from that. And I'll give a couple of questions on that, or what do I want to say? A couple of examples of that. Any questions so far, Paco? Am I hitting where you want to go?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think those are all great ways to actually view this process, because I think, for, again, going back to the whole shiny object syndrome, is that, really asking yourself, what is the goal you need? And can you do what you need with the resources you have, right? And I think that that's a big
Absolutely
topic that you have to bring internalized to figure out, because I think what a lot of us do is that, I can't go without this tool. And it's like, can you really not go without the tool? Or is it a preference because you don't want to either deem or seem like you don't are not running an official IT shop? Or B, is it you're buying into the hype because that's what you love and this is what you want, but really the business needs something else?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the focus should be on basically what makes you money and what takes care of your customers, not versus what's shiny and what others are telling you to do. So again, I go into the proactive manage. I think a lot of MSPs misrepresent themselves as proactive managers, And I think a big cue or a big clue onto that is if somebody looks into their ticketing system or their queue of work. I mean, how many of us can honestly say that queue of work is proactive work? You're not just responding to a client. So my first set of needs for a vendor discovery is what type of vendors do I need that make me proactive? And I would suggest maybe one of the primary ones and one of the simplest ones that we've engaged with and we've become much more proactive on is our DNS or domain provider. We have taken the literal mosh pit of what our clients have used, begged, borrowed, and stolen from them their credentials and let them know that we are now going to manage this as part of their monthly cost, no extra cost to them for their first and primary domain. And we've moved everything over to Cloudflare, which allows us to be extremely proactive on everything that has to do with their domain and their DNS, meaning we set up DKIM, DMARC, SPF, MTA, STS, blah, 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 all those acronyms. We are way out in front of all of that. And we also manage access to that domain to eliminate any problems from other vendors proactively discarding or allowing changes to MX records or other records. And we also have notations on all of those DNS entries so that we know exactly what they mean when we go back in 6 months to a year from now and we say, what the heck is that entry for? We actually know what we're talking about so that we don't break their domain and have to reactively respond to that. So, that would be a proactive vendor, somebody that allows you to get out in front of things. And that is definitely, again, in our discussion, if we want to be in that business when choosing a vendor, yes, we want to be in the DNS domain vendor business because it allows us to be proactive. And I don't think there's anything else that needs to be said about that because it checks that proactive check mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a buy-in that it took me a while to do because I'd always associated domains with web developers, and I didn't want to get into the web development business. But the domain name has evolved in such a way where not only are we monitoring it for security-wise for email and control so much, but I was educated that this is what the cyber insurance providers are doing. They're scanning the domain to determine the security posture of that business. And their thought is if a client does not have SPF, DKM, DMARC set up and all these other protocols from their limited knowledge of what they understand, their assumption is, well, if they didn't do this on the domain properly, I can only imagine what their house is like. And that's what determines the insurability. And so that was a very big eye opener for me when I spoke with our cyber insurance broker, who provided a report that literally said, hey, here, look, we're not full of it. We're running the same reports that some of the bigger ones, and they're owned by one of the three big insurance providers. And here's the reports. Here are the IPs that are exposed. Here's what's going on. We have a trend of what we think is on average for that particular industry. Some are doing much better. Some are doing really bad. And so we were surprised that we had a client that we were trying to onboard or we're trying to close on as a prospect, and they were the worst offender because we didn't manage them. So it just shows on the importance of, it doesn't necessarily mean a tool is going to help be proactive. It's a matter of actually having the knowledge to be proactive and making sure you can speak to that with confidence.
And the other thing is about bringing value too. So since we control that, we can do a lot of, or I don't want to say control because the customer owns that. Since we manage that proactively, we can make a lot of changes and we can do a lot of the behind the scenes things that where we don't even require client involvement. So we're not wasting their time waiting on a password or asking them to retain something that probably insecurely, if they haven't implemented our password manager standard, something like that. So we can protect them from themselves and just literally save them time. And if they're dealing with a web developer, all they need to do is put a ticket in and we'll handle that with a web developer. Again, adding value and removing wasted time from their day.
Right.
So again, I think it's win-win-win because it just checks that proactive check marks in so many ways. The next one is a pretty big one that I see discussed in the MSP Unplugged group a lot is, basically the reselling of computers. What are we doing for computer hardware? Endpoints specifically, maybe a little bit in the server world. And I don't want to, mix this up with like selling network equipment, which I think is a huge value add, which should be controlled by an end user, or excuse me, by the MSP and not the end user. And I'm also not suggesting here that you're not setting up a standard that your customers need to follow. But I guess my example would be, let's say you're managing like 250 endpoints, and that's what you have in your stack right now. You're a small MSP, and you're just starting to ramp up. So you hit that 250 mark. On average, according to a 2021 survey, companies smaller than 100 employees, they replace about 20% of their computing devices every year. And this survey does include phones as well. So I'd say that 19% number is probably pretty high, but let's just go on the 19%. So that means if you've got 250 endpoints, you're going to sell about 47 computers a year. That's about 3 to 4 a month. The average, what do I want to say, profit margin on a PC, now this is average, I don't know what most people are doing, is 5%. That means on a $1,500 laptop, you're making $71. I would be willing to bet you have more than an hour of your time into procurement through distribution for that device. So that means, let's just do an hour. So that means at 5%, $71, selling those devices, you're making about $3,300 a year. All right. And with an hour in, you could have billed $150 for that hour somewhere else. I'll let everybody do the math before I babble on more. The lesson learned here is, do you want to be in the business of selling endpoints? Is it actually something that makes you money? Is it something that is actually wasting your time, creating a lead time bottleneck, creating a constraint? Are you wasting time on creating quotations for that sort of stuff? Are you wasting time on your sales cycle, meaning research, quotation, getting a signature, acceptance, ordering, distribution, shipping, all of that stuff, when you're losing that potential time on either billable hours or just on service delivery and creating value in other ways? I'm not saying that selling endpoints is a bad idea, but if you're going to do it at that low of a yield, meaning 3 to 4 per month, you got to find a vendor that can work with you and do that quickly. And maybe at this point, it's trying to find a vendor where you can start small and say, hey, I'm just going to send links to customers on the specific equipment they should purchase. And then once I get to 500, 800, 900 endpoints, and that goes from 50 computers a year to 100 to 200 to 300 to 400, well, then I'll take over that direct link status to more of a one-on-one distribution model or a resale model, because my margins are going to go up based on my quantity of products sold, because the prices will go down, so on and so forth. So there's a whole thing there. So, one, do we need a vendor? Should I be in the computer business? On the total opposite scale of that, networking equipment should be something that you can look into your books and say, hey, I'm making a nice profit margin on this stuff, and I'm actually making money on this stuff. So, there's two things there for you to look at, that where the numbers should obviously lead you where you need to go. Again, focus what's unprofitable. Networking should be a profit leader in the hardware you're selling. And then consider that your hardware profit, not your revenue, your hardware profit is probably a very small part of your profitability overall as an MSP. You're really billing for your time. So again, just focus on what makes you money.
All valid points for sure.
All right, so actually let's get to vendor discovery. What exactly, once I determine that a vendor or whatever I'm doing is going to make my life easier, meaning as the MSP, and in our case, Paco, what makes our life easier, meaning what makes ProdigyTeks life easier for all. And there's some considerations here. It has to make our admin's life easier. It has to make our ops life easier, and it has to make our director's life easier. Because the way the equation works, if things are easier for us, it's always better. It's always better for the client. It allows us to be proactive, so the vendors have to allow us to be proactive, and it has to give us an opportunity to make some money. So, now I turn my focus back into the vendor. If the vendor doesn't meet those requirements, push to find a different partner to handle that need. I can have the customer order direct, or, an example of this where you might go halfway at the beginning is looking at Amazon. Get some referral links for Amazon for endpoint products, keyboards, mice, webcams, monitors. Maybe that's stuff you don't want to sell via quotation and go through your sales cycle process to do. You send them a link based on your standardization. It makes your life easier. You work with your clients and offices so they actually always have an extra keyboard, mouse, and webcam in the office, and even maybe a monitor or two, just so there's no downtime. Those are all low-cost items that they can standardize on. I did this with my clients. I did ASUS monitors. I used one of their corporate level monitors, which was our standard, and I did Microsoft products, keyboards, mice, and webcams. And not necessarily that they were better, but they were always at least very good, and they were always 95% plug and play. So anybody could install them. There was never any need to install other software, assistive software. They just plugged in, they worked at least to the 90% level. So it's all those things. One, made my life easier. I didn't have to worry about that. The other big bonus is a lot of the time those drivers get updated in Windows Update, checkbox, one less thing for me to do, which makes things better for the customer, so on and so forth. So once we've determined that, and now that I know that I need a vendor, I guess I would go through my vendor discovery list unless you have any other questions for me.
No, I mean, I think that's a big point of understanding is that, standardization has always been a big thing that we've been preaching. I think that is the ability of also, don't overthink it. I think it's a matter of, hey, look, this is what's worked. This is what's happening. This is what we're going to roll out. Right. And I think there's a fine ability of trying to figure out the right product to then roll out versus, okay, I found something that's good. It's available 95% of the time. It's going to take care of what I need to do. Just deploy it. And then I think there's a lost art of not getting to good, and being able to just get to good and then improving onto that is such a big thing that needs to be talked more about as we kind of move forward with the community.
I love that thing of getting to good. And that's kind of the way that I looked at Microsoft products. And I think that's huge because your visibility on that good spectrum has to be from procurement of that product all the way to the end when it hits your ops team or your tickets. Meaning, Microsoft webcam is never going to be the best webcam there is out there. It's always going to be lacking some features, even behind maybe Logitech products, which I would put on probably the same scale of good, better, best. But always available. The Microsoft name is easy to sell. They're going to work with your Windows products without a problem. It's just super easy to standardize and not get burnt somewhere along the line by that. So, I agree. Getting to good is where you want to be with that standardization model. And then you can go off that standardization model if you have specific specialized needs. And you only do that at a very small percentage of the time. All right, so let's get back into discovering some vendors and what you and I have determined in our list of what's important. And these are in no specific order. It's all just things that we consider when we're looking at a vendor and how we, scorecard them when we might bring them on. And I'm hoping this will be a help to everybody. And the first one that, since you're in Chicago, that we kind of checked the box really quick on was location. Because you kind of a win-win-win because there's a lot of vendors that are right there in Chicago. So if we look at our Renactus products, there's actually a distribution facility pretty close actually to your home or to the office, Paco? Or both?
Ish. It's close to a client of ours for sure.
well, the way that we looked at that is, boom, we got 1 day delivery without having to pay any extra.
Or we can head up there locally to pick it up.
And in a pinch, we can pick up. And if I'm not mistaken, the pickup desk is open 24 hours. Is it still open?
Yes. So basically, you can set it up for 24-hour pickup. So you can kind of get to whenever you need to go. You can go have it ordered during normal business hours, and you can pick it up whenever you need to.
So that's always a huge consideration, location. And the reason it's a consideration for me is because I preach to Paco all the time about lead time. If I'm looking through the ticket queue or our admin queue and I see, hey, this customer is requesting a quote on a laptop and it's 2 days later and we haven't sent that pricing, that's what gets me upset. I don't get upset, but that's what gets me concerned, or I don't know what word I want to do, but lead time stinks. It's just a killer in any business. It doesn't make you look good to your clients. And if for some reason you stock out on something and your customer needs it, that's not a good thing either. So again, choosing that vendor on location is a big win for us. The other one's pretty easy, and we talk about this, but it can lead to that precious syndrome, that shiny object syndrome, is product or vendor reputation. On the negative side, this is usually pretty easy. I mean, I always go back to what Norton antivirus or Symantec antivirus used to be the best. Or back in the day, that was the go-to. Now, I'm not sure that either one of those products have a huge following in the MSP community. I certainly don't see that. And when I talk to everybody that we talk to, those companies certainly don't get a lot of love. So it seems to be a big consumer product, not in the MSP field anymore. So, that's one. The other, on the other scheme, thing there is, don't just be a lemming, or don't be that thing that you jump on the marketing bandwagon because that product or this vendor has really good marketing, and you're just following everybody else. Do your due diligence before you jump in. And then the last thing on the reputation, and actually we chose probably one of our current vendors, our new vendors based on this, was Mesh, we use for email security now. And that was a product discovery. I'm trying to remember who. It might have been from Kyle Kinnan in the MSPU group, mentioning, has anybody ever heard of it? And we had not. And then we started looking at it when we were looking at for an alternative. And again, almost zero reputation, but yet we still took a hard look and actually chose them over some other products that have what I would say a much stronger reputation in the industry, just based on our testing and the way that things went. So again, reputation is a double-edged sword, so use that with caution. Moving on, compatibility. There's a couple things here. Not only product compatibility, but I would suggest with the way that we do business and the way that we want to do business. So vendor compatibility. Do they work the way that I do? Meaning, we prefer to do month-to-month contracts. We like to do credit card terms. We don't like long commitments. We want to be a good partner, so we want them to win our business as we're providing feedback. We like vendors that help us simplify our stack. If we can remove the number of software applications that we need to install on all of our endpoints to fulfill our needs, that's great. So we always like that simplification. And again, this kind of ties back into using for those accessories. It's just compatible. It's simple. It's simplified the way we did work, or the way I did work. And this is also discussions that we've bounced into, Paco, about using, maybe switching from Dell to the Surface line of products from Microsoft, meaning, hey, all those firmware and all that BIOS and all that comes down. That's something else we won't have to keep our eye on. We can just hit Windows Update. But then you get in, then we go, and it's another one of us. What's the product depth? What's their product line look like? Well, they certainly don't have the full product line that Dell does, at least at this point, outside of mobile. So, do we now cross mix where we're using Dell desktops and Surface products for our mobile devices? So on and on it goes. So again, compatibility in the way that we want to work, but then again, making that consideration all the way from procurement and lead time and constraints there to when tickets start coming in and how we service that, and even on the repair side of that. All right, next one we always talk about is security. What are our vendors doing to make sure that we're protected and our customers are protected? And usually the deeper we dig into this, the more questions we get, the more we get upset, and the more that we scratch our heads. The one I have is just, why doesn't every vendor I deal with, and these are usually service vendors, why don't they have IP restriction and with MFA and then just solve every problem? Even some of the big security vendors we deal with, like Huntress, don't have that. Our current RMM sort of has it in a broken sort of fashion. So it's just frustrating when it seems like every podcast we listen to talks about, security, but then it seems like vendors are a big loophole in that. But again, we want to verify that our vendors have strong security measures in place to protect our business data, our clients' data, and we want to avoid that breach. Anything to add there? Anything I'm missing, or am I too high on my horse on that IP restriction?
I mean, I think that IP restriction is becoming a big addition that's needed. I think that, you know, there is this strong enforcement of people don't even put MFA on, which Michael Crean over at Solutions Granted, when we've talked to him multiple times, he's like, yeah, there's so many things that you can get popped for. But he goes, but the number one thing I see that people are just not taking seriously is turning MFA on. Like, get to good, turn MFA on, have the ability to have MFA and a good MFA. Don't do SMS to text. Like, we have a vendor that currently has that, and that's their form of 2FA. You know, that's you know, I think those are really, I think, where the industry is really trying to enforce right now. IP restriction is that next layer, in my opinion. IP/geo restriction, like you mentioned. And I know some of them are trying to solve that with SSO, which that's a whole nother conversation, and that's
Don't get me
more of a
started.
yeah. So, you know, and some are trying to solve it with that. And, you know, for those to implement SSO properly, being able to get the IP restriction and restrictions through there. So there's so many ways to attack this, as you mentioned. But also at the same time, you know, security of vetting a vendor is, you know, there should be a standard that we should be able to do across the entire board, and not all of our vendors are doing all that as well. So whether that's MFA to IP restriction, geolocation, you know, etc., or abiding by those rules for all roles in a particular business. So definitely a problem. Some are trying to figure it out, and then there's just some we're hoping they're trying to figure it out because we haven't heard from them. You know, so there's that feedback to add.
I'm just going to leave that right there. We'll move on to the next vendor discovery consideration that we take in. There's about 3 or 4 more here. So the next one is obviously support. You know, what kind of support are we going to get from them? Is there any sort of language barrier? Service hours, you know, what type of weekend support? Yeah, type, phone, email, chat. As the operations director, I have really become to embrace with the few vendors that we have that have chat support, so that I can simply just ask a question and have a quick discussion. I really like that. A thumbs up to Magnus Box. I'll give them a shout out. I've had very good luck with their chat support when we've just needed something quick. I wish more people had that. And then I didn't
even know Magnus Box had it.
Yeah, right on their main page. Yeah. And then I really like the vendors that have support built into the control panel, meaning I don't have to send an email or anything. I can put a ticket in right in the control panel. And then I like how the ops team, and we can all review those and see those right there. Within, you know, Mesh does this in a good way, in need of some improvements in our opinion. And but, you know, I like that, so that the whole team can see that, and then also see if there's already been a question asked, so they don't have to duplicate effort if it hasn't made it into our technical documentation. The next one is pretty easy. It's the scalability. Will this vendor grow with you? So again, I go back to that whole thing of selling endpoints. Maybe you're just sending Dell links at the beginning, and then when you're ready, you can go to distribution, and then maybe at some point you can go to Dell Direct as a reseller. You know, definitely Dell is somebody you can grow with. I would suggest Microsoft is somewhere where you can do that as well, depending on how large you get from a partner to direct. You know, those are the type of scalabilities you have with those types of organizations. Keep in mind, though, a lot of the times when you're a tiny fish in that huge vendor sea, that you're going to have to find alternative ways to source those products, because they're not going to be very interested in you if you're only selling 25 to 50 endpoints a year. So that's just something to keep in mind. But always think long-term, I guess, is the rule there. The next vendor thing that we look at is their flexibility. You know, do they have any flexibility in their pricing? Will they work with us on specific products? Can they provide a customized solution from us? Dealing with the smaller business size that we do, less than 100 users for most clients, for, you know, 90% of our clients, you know, how does that work? My biggest thing, just so the admin staff looks at it, is it easy to order and get quotes from them in a timely manner? I always tell them when they're doing that, I say, well, was it harder than ordering from Amazon? And if they say yes, then I say, well, we got a problem. We got to figure out how to make this easier. And then the big one everybody seems to get bid on, and we've been bid on in the end, is, how do our returns and exchanges handled? I don't think we've ever had a good experience with a return and exchange with any of the big distributors that we deal with. No. Even when we've been told that it's not a problem to return it because we're just testing it, it's bitten us in the butt. And I think most of that product has gone onto eBay after testing, if I'm not mistaken, because the exchange or return was almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, a couple little things at the end, just, and then one personal item at the end is innovation. If you looked at a product in the past or you're returning to a vendor, are things exactly the same as they were a year ago? I mean, that probably means this company's not innovating and they're just sitting on this product for whatever reason. Yeah, I like to be on the cutting edge, but I certainly don't like to be on the bleeding edge of any new technology with a vendor. So obviously some caution there. Communication, I like a vendor that touches us about once a month, not in a personal way, but in a technical way. That would be awesome. We like those strong relationships. We really like vendors that we can have what we call open beer conversations with. And I would say most of the vendors we deal with, we have that sort of thing where if we're going to have sort of a heated meeting, we always say we're sitting around the bar, we're having some beers in our hand, and then the profanity and other things starts flying, just, and everybody can unload on each other in a productive way. So that's awesome. I really like that. That's fun. That's kind of like those TechCon talks around the tables. So I really like that. And then the last official thing that I look at, or we look at for sure, is the legal and compliance stuff. Just make sure that you can get anything you need for compliance, meaning HIPAA, PCI, or any other industry regulations and standards you need. Don't go all in with a vendor without making sure that you can meet any compliance checkmarks that you need in place. That's a big one. And, make sure that's there, because you don't want to put all the time and effort into discovery and then find out they can't do anything with HIPAA when you definitely need it. So, that's a big one. And then the other one, last thing I want to put on there, and I don't want to discount, is the nice to have features. If you're a small MSP like us and you're burning that oil every day, are the vendors, can they fit into your business lifestyle? And what I mean by that is, do they have a nice app for your mobile device that allows you to be a little bit more proactive? Is there a way, if you're the manager or if you're the company owner, that they allow you to do a top-down look at your business from these applications? Do they have a, Apple CarPlay app in some instance, or Android Auto? What are the niceties that maybe this would be my determining factor at the end? If I had two ties, I would basically say, how does this fit into my lifestyle? Meaning, would I enjoy using this vendor over that vendor? That would be my last win-win decision. Who to choose would be if it just makes my life a little bit more enjoyable.
Yeah. No, I think those are all good points as well. It's because I think, you want, what's the word? Quality of life features.
Yes.
That,
thank you.
That will help you get along with where you're at, especially for those that are leveraging the tools and efficiencies of those, because you may not have the resources to manually do it for some of those tools.
Well, it's just dumb things like, is this dashboard prettier at the end of the day?
Right.
Do I want to log in and run text commands, or text commands, or do I want to check a checkbox? So right. Those are the nice things to have at the end when you're determining which vendors to choose.
Buttons and checkboxes.
Buttons and checkboxes. Yep, for sure.
No,
what I miss, boss? Anything?
No, I mean, I think that we kind of covered it all from really on what we're trying to achieve. Is just that, there is a lot that vendor discovery has been discussed a lot in a lot of groups, but there's no one that's really discussed on how to go through that, right? And what are the things you should be asking for? What should you be looking at? And how do you relate that to your business? I think that's so important to know that, again, you should really define what you're looking for up front before you start this search. I was talking to Rick, I think it was yesterday, and we were talking about how I hate our current proposal and sales software that we currently use. And he never had issues with it. And so through an additional conversation, come to find out, we both use it very differently. So from A, his recommendation, but also B, of what my expectation was, were two very different. So every time we talked about, and I was always talking smack about the tool, and he would always say, well, I don't have that problem. Come to find out, we were in completely two different lanes on really discussing what those are. So really defining your goals, really understanding what you're trying to achieve is going to help you as you A, vet your current vendors, right? And or B, if you're looking at something else, what you really are truly trying to find, and what can be something that's going to help you in the long run. So but with that, I think we've chatted quite a bit on this for being a Resource Thursday episode. Are there any lasting thoughts outside of the quality of life features or anything that we've discussed, John, before we kind of round out the show?
Probably my biggest tip there is, and this is maybe hard to do, is just, maybe make your business decisions with a little bit of discipline. When you're first starting out, or you're young MSP, or you're a small MSP, you jump on that bandwagon that, ooh, I could sell this object to my clients and I could make X amount of dollars. Just make sure that process is not costing you more than you're making in the long run. Determine that. Don't get burned by that, because, at the end of the day, you've only have so many hours in the week to provide the value that your clients are demanding. And if you're stressed to the hilt and you're out of hours and you still have more work to do, you could be spinning your wheels on something that's actually not providing value. So, in your vendor discovery, make sure that's part of that.
Gotcha. No, all great wise words, great topic, great discussion. For those that want to reach out to John, he's definitely available in the MSP community Facebook group. The way to get in is either you could support on Patreon if you choose, or get an invite by someone from the group. If you know somebody who knows somebody, that's the way to get in. You don't necessarily have to contribute to Patreon. But you also, I'm sorry, I screwed that up. You can purchase a ticket from TechCon Unplugged, or if you are a previous purchaser of TechCon Unplugged tickets, you're definitely available to come to the group, or you get an invite from someone from the group. Patreon is more of a support of the show that we've modified early in the year, so you don't necessarily need to support, but we appreciate the support as well. So John is a great resource, drops a lot of knowledge every morning, and sometimes throughout the day, depending on what's relevant in the space. So definitely great to hear and interact with him in the group as well. So John, really appreciate you coming out here today. And for those that have tuned in, we appreciate you tuning in. If you'd like to hear more about this type of content, you can tune in every Tuesday and Thursday. Watch the video podcast on YouTube.com/MSP Unplugged. Like, subscribe, hit that notification button to be notified whenever an episode is available. You can also take us on the go on your favorite podcatcher app. We're on Amazon Music, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.